everyone, welcome to the Lidocaine Drip.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Jess, and we'll be your host for today.
And always...
We're not really organized on this podcast.
Not organized at all.
But we're going to have fun along the way.
You know, we're here to talk about what you may be thinking throughout the day and don't say, or what you do say and get in trouble for saying. That's usually what I do.
In all seriousness, we made this podcast to combat mental health issues in veterinary medicine.
Mental health in general.
And we're here to inject humor into the darkness of our lives.
Very dark, very, very dark lives.
So let's get down to it.
Let's get down to it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode.
Hola. ¿Cómo estás?
We're just sitting here getting ready to celebrate Kevin's graduation tomorrow, right?
Thank God, yeah.
Finally. So we can finally call you Doctor. And
what a long road. I felt like I've been going down the yellow brick road for years.
Oh, yes, I remember that when I graduated, but it's fun. It'll be the ceremony's boring. But
yeah, obviously.
You'll have fun celebrating with all of your classmates and your family.
We sure do like to party, my class.
I bet. Okay, so today, of course, we're going to start out with mental health check-in and light of facts, but our topic is something that... So we had a conversation with Rachel, our guest from last week, and she suggested that we try and be more focused on topics that are veterinary specific. And I mean, we could still do something like FOMO, but just make it more like FOMO for veterinary medicine or because of veterinary medicine or whatever, something like that.
Do you think they had a veterinarian on the Titanic? That just came to me, but...
Probably not. Why would they?
Because they had a lot of pets on the plane, on the boat. So,
I don't think so. That would be my guess. Is no. But I don't know.
You know, it'd be a great fact. When did the first veterinarian exist? Like, who started it all? I bet veterinary school was so much easier years ago. Like
probably.
In 1910, being a veterinarian.
Well, they probably didn't know as much.
And they probably got like
know.
5 pennies a day. That was probably their salary.
Maybe 5 pennies a day. Yeah. With inflation, it's probably about what we get anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So we decided that we would talk today about euthanasia. We had done a poll on Instagram a while ago about which topics should we do, and it was between FOMO or euthanasia, and most people picked FOMO, but we decided that euthanasia is something that is very specific to veterinary medicine.
It is.
And there can be a lot of emotions tied to that, so that's today's topic, and
what a great topic for today.
We'll get into that in just a little bit, but first we'll start off with a mental health check-in. So, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I'm a little scatterbrained at the moment. I don't really know what's going on. It's like everything's happening so fast. I just had a horrible 3-day adventure trying to get back to the northeast of the United States for graduation. I had to drive from down south. It was like a 21-hour drive. I've never driven more than like 4 or 5 hours in general, so it was hell. It was hell on earth, I'm not gonna lie. I'm really dreading having to go back and do it all on the way back. Maybe I'll change up the route and I'll stop somewhere exciting. Maybe a nice little tree in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the country. That's all that there is the whole drive. But yeah, I'm a little tired from that, and I'm excited for graduation. I'm also trying to figure out where I want to live, so I don't know if I'm going to stay in the Northeast or move back down south, so that's like a big problem at the moment. I should be happy and like ecstatic that everything has come to an end and I'm at the end of the road, and I did everything I wanted to do. Like, I accomplished my dreams, but it's hard to just like sit and take all that in when there's so much else going on in your life. There's just a lot of decisions to make in general. So yeah, I'm just a little scatterbrained. I think I'm a little calm now that I'm done with rotations. And, it's a very fitting topic because my last patient ever of my last rotation ever ended up in euthanasia. So I think it was a great way to go out. But as we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. I would agree with the scatterbrained thing, because all it takes sometimes is just like, you're going along and you're doing your thing, and then like one thing happens and you're just, I don't know, like it just throws everything off. I don't know.
What does that mean?
Like you just have something that preoccupies your mind, and then that just throws your whole like routine and everything off.
I get it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm also a little frustrated with, not my life, but just, I guess, my work life right now. There's just a lot of changes and unrest and instability surrounding my job. Not that my job is necessarily in jeopardy, but there's just a lot in flux right now, and I don't like that, because they're big things that I would feel more comfortable if I was able to know where I stood with everything.
That seems to be a reoccurring theme for you.
Yeah, with work.
Yeah, so it's like at least you have the job, and I guess maybe in the interim you're gonna have to get used to the instability, I guess. It's just, there's a lot of, we all spend so much time stressing about certain things in our lives, and that one's something that you can't change, so like don't let it occupy your thoughts anymore. You know what I mean? I guess it's hard not to, but I just mean it's something you've brought up multiple times, so maybe it's taking up a lot of space in your brain and in your life that it could be focused other places. Like if it's not going anywhere.
No, and I guess it's just that there seems to be this subculture in residency programs in general across the board, not just surgery, that it's normal to be really stressed. And there's a saying that, during your second year in residency, which will be me next year, it's normal, around the springtime or when you're kind of at that halfway point in your residency, to just hate everything and just be apathetic and not care. Like that's considered quote unquote normal. Mm-hmm. And why? Why is it normal? How is that okay? Like, I guess I know I probably, nothing is going to change, but I just think that for people to label that as normal and just being that stressed that you just literally, stop caring, I don't think that that's healthy, and I think that that's a huge issue. Not to divert and talk about a different topic for today's episode, but I just think it's a huge issue that across the board in residency programs.
I actually there was a VIN, the Veterinary Information Network. Mm-hmm. They had an essay contest that went on 3 months ago. The winner's not announced yet, so I could be a potential winner. But they had a thing where you talk about one subject, multiple areas of veterinary medicine, and the one I focused on was exactly what you're talking about, of what needs to change in the profession. And it's the same thing with veterinary students. And then I also brought up about residents in general, everyone in the profession, they just, there's a norm to feeling. There's a consensus that in veterinary school and in residency, you basically are expected to just be a hot mess, and you're not supposed to take time for yourself. You're not supposed to focus on anything but the profession. You're not supposed to take mental health breaks and go out to dinner or go out with your friends or anything. You're just supposed to be a hot mess, stressed out, pulling your hair out, stressing about grades, not getting enough sleep, not having a quality of life. And there was articles online, and there are some people that have published papers, and they're like, why is it the norm? Like, why is it accepted that you can't have a quality of life while going to veterinary school, while being a resident? Because, you know, that's the problem in general with why there's like a high suicide rate and why there's all these concerns about mental health and mental health awareness in the profession. Because, you know what? No, you should be able to go to dinner. You should be able to be like, I'm going to go out tonight for 5 hours and not focus on all the stress in my life and not get called in or not have to do this paper or not do this research project and just like have a night to yourself. And that should be okay. Like, it shouldn't be, you know, it shouldn't be acceptable for professors and faculty to just be like, oh, they're stressed out, you'll get over it, that's life, like, this is what's expected of you. Because no, it's like, it's not. You know, that's the shift that needs to happen. It shouldn't be expected of you. You should have, like, high stressful periods, but it shouldn't be the norm that...
All the time.
It
shouldn't be a constant.
Because when you take time for yourself to get the stress out or, like, focus on something else, it ultimately comes back full circle and makes you a better doctor and a better student when you do take the time for yourself to release that tension and stress in your body. And when people actually, like, understand what you're going through and make you feel that it's okay that you're tired or want to cry or you need a break, and not that you're like weak or lazy or a baby, you know, that's the problem. That's the whole problem, and I think people are a little more aware of it now.
Yeah, that contributes a huge amount to,
Like, what is you being a resident? What is you working 7 days a week? Maybe you're on call every single night. I'm not saying you are, but what is that saying about you as a future surgeon versus someone who works 5 or 6 days a week and has 1 day off for themselves, like, completely, and doesn't have to, you know, like, there's no, that doesn't mean you're a better surgeon if you can do 7 days a week for 3 years versus, you know what I mean? Like, why is there, like, that stereotype?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's another episode we'll have to have
Clearly.
for everybody who thinks that will do, you know, wants to do an internship or a residency program or something like that. But, yeah, I don't know what the solution is. I just think that more conversations need to be had, and that it shouldn't be considered normal to be so stressed that you just emotionally shut down. Because that's what happens to me is I'm like, I have all this work to do, but I literally cannot mentally handle it. So I'll just go and sit down on the couch and, like, zone out and watch TV or Netflix or whatever. But anyway, we digress.
Should we just talk about this then for the episode and screw the euthanasia for another time?
No, because we already said we were going to talk about euthanasia.
All right, fine.
So we'll do another episode on that and another time. But okay, so Lidocaine. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Oh, let me get my phone.
Okay.
Hopefully it doesn't mess up anything. So, my Lidocaine is sort of shitty today. Sorry, everyone. But since we're talking about euthanasia, I just had some statistics from the American Humane Society from animal shelters. So I found it, like, it was sort of uplifting to know that, well, not uplifting, but in 2011, there was 2.6 million animals that were euthanized in animal shelters, okay? You know, due to various reasons. But a more recent study in the past year and a half found that approximately 1.5 million shelter animals are currently being euthanized each year. So it's gone down a significant amount, like 2.6 to 1.5 million. That's like, you know, a trend in the right direction. I thought it was interesting that more cats are euthanized than dogs, and it's just because a lot of cats are taken to animal shelters because there's no form of identification. So a lot of the shelters, you know, across the country, there is still a high percentage of high kill shelters, but just in general, you know, you don't really put a collar and, like, a tag with your information on it on, you know, Fluffy the cat, whereas you would a dog. So, you know, it's probably about, it's according to this article, it's about 2/3 of cats compared to, like, 1/3 of dogs are euthanized and brought into shelters.
I also think a part of that is that people don't want as many cats. Like, I think that's I think that's a huge part of it, is people tend, not everybody, but the majority, I would say, tend to go more towards dogs than cats.
Mm-hmm.
But
why is that?
I don't know.
I think it's funny, though, and a lot of people don't realize, in rotations, too, like, the most recent rotation I was on, the teacher, like, went around the room and was like, who here loves cats? And there was, like, one person out of 11.
Yeah.
And everyone else was like, I hate cats. You know, that's what everyone was saying, and I was like, this is a problem.
Yeah.
It's like, you're going to your vet, and there's, like, a lot of people that don't love cats, but they take it on themselves. Cats do it to themselves, and how they, you know, react at vets and stuff, but I have a cat.
Yeah, I have 2.
Yeah. 2?
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 cats? I thought you have 1 cat.
No, I have 2.
All right. Well, also, they estimated in this article that the number of dogs and cats entering the U.S. shelters annually has declined from 7.2 million in 2011 to 6.5. So it's like 1 million.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. The biggest decline, though, was in dogs. That went from 3.9 million to 3.3. Still, there's a lot of animals that are euthanized, and I think that brings up the topic that someone said we should talk about, which is, like, humane euthanasia, which we do a lot of at school and stuff. And
Aren't they all humane euthanasia, though?
Well, yeah, but what's the word for when you have the public dropping off animal? Like, there was a term for it, like, not humane euthanasia, but it's almost like corporate, like, not... It's like mass euthanasia for stray animals that people find.
I don't know if there's a term for it.
She had a term.
Oh,
but
I feel like every euthanasia that I've done, and I think most veterinarians do, is what would be considered humane euthanasia, because that's the AVMA guidelines. You have to do that. That's part of the oath that you take. I guess you don't have to do it, but...
So, like, how do you describe a euthanasia that's an owner that puts down their pet versus someone that brings in an animal, is hit by a car on the side of the road, it's not their pet, and they're bringing in the pet out of the kindness of their heart to put down or get treatment or whatever? There's a difference, but I don't know if there's a way to describe it.
I don't know if I have a different... In my mind, I don't have those labeled as different things. So, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't think that they have different names.
Okay, that's fair.
In those situations.
Sorry, everyone, that was my wine. Because I don't have a wine glass anymore, in case anyone was wondering. I have this metal tin cup that I use for wine because my cat broke the wine glass, and it sticks to my coaster. And when you pick up the coaster flings off. It makes a huge noise, and it's a whole ordeal. God, what the heck? Another reason to be mad at the cat.
Freaking cats, man. Okay, well...
Yeah. Give us a light effect, please.
Yeah, I've got some light effects, I guess, in honor of your graduation for tomorrow. So... Did you know that? So, you know, at the end of the ceremony, like, it's customary to, like, throw your hat up or whatever.
Is it?
Yeah, like most, like, graduation ceremonies, most people do that. So, tossing of the graduation hat is a tradition signaling the end of the ceremonies. The flight of the hat symbolizes the flight of the graduates to whatever awaits them. Oh, isn't that nice?
What a sweet thing.
Okay, we all have been to a graduation, either personally or been in the audience for one.
I hope so.
And that stupid song that they play at every single graduation.
As we go on,
no,
we remember
not Vitamin
all
C.
the times we had together.
Not that one. Not that one. That was beautiful. It's actually Pomp and Circumstance, which is the song I was thinking of, not Graduation by Vitamin C.
Oh, I love that song.
That is a good song.
Should we play it?
Not right now.
Okay. I think I did a beautiful rendition, so we don't even need to play it.
So,
Pomp and Circumstance, it used to not be as popular way back in the early 1900s. So that was composed originally in 1901 by Edward Elgar. The tune was eventually adopted by Princeton in 1907, Chicago in 1908, Columbia in 1913, Vassar in 1916, and then Rutgers in 1918 as their official graduation ceremony accompaniment. And clearly it took off like wildfire from there because it is at every single graduation.
Clearly, if they were alive today, they'd be making bank.
Oh my gosh, yeah, right? All those royalties.
Wow.
Okay, and then the last thing I was going to talk about was the protocol for, you have a tassel on your mortar board or your...
mortar? What the hell's a mortar board?
That's what the hat is.
It's called your mortar boat?
No. Mortar board.
Your mortar board.
The tassel was added in the 19th century to that.
Oh my God.
And the protocol requires that the tassel be worn on the right side of the mortar board until the candidate receives his or her degree, and then it's moved to the left. So, there you go. You'll hopefully experience some of those tomorrow.
I'm going to experience a lot tomorrow. I'll let everyone know.
Okay. Yeah, so...
Mortarboard?
Yeah.
I can't even say the stupid word.
That's what it's called. It's like that square piece of cardboard, and then they attach it to a hat, and you have to wear it on your head, and nobody can ever look good. It's a terrible idea.
Well, I'm going to try to denounce that and try to look good on my mortarboard.
You don't have that square piece of cardboard mortarboard. You have like this ugly... I don't even know. I called it like a doctor hat. No, it's like
doctor hat.
It's like flat, but it's like it's terrible.
About?
You'll see when you'll see. It's terrible. So
okay, great to know.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So euthanasia.
Oh God.
I feel like this can be a pretty heavy topic, so we might get a little serious. We might try to lighten it up with humor, but I don't know. I think that this is something that is unique to veterinary medicine. I would say that it's, unfortunately something we deal with very often, and it's usually, unfortunately, an option that, I guess, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's an option that is always there at any point during your conversation with the owners about their animal. Mm-hmm. So that's always like a treatment option. Is, a lot of the time...
Well, it's not a treatment if you're euthanizing.
Well, it is, because... If a lot of the times I would say it's financially driven decision.
Yeah.
Or prognosis. So if the animal doesn't have very good prognosis or something like that, then that can drive that decision. But it's always a treatment option. That's how I think about it. And I know you haven't done any. Like, you've been a part of euthanasias as a student, but you probably haven't, like, done them, and you're the one having to come to that decision.
Oh, yes, I have.
Where?
When I was a technician, see, this brings up a whole slew of conversation. When I was a technician at the emergency hospital at 19, well, I started at 18, but I was at the front desk for, like, 6 months. And then I started learning, I'd be like, how do you run blood work? How do you do this? And I eventually, transitioned to downstairs. But this was, 10 years ago. So, I feel like in the past 10 years, a lot of restrictions and rules and just the way veterinary hospitals operate is a lot more regulated now. Mm-hmm. So I started in an emergency hospital, and, I was the emergency response technician from, 6 to 2 a.m., and I would often stay till, 3 or 4 on certain nights. But my first year there, I think I probably euthanized personally, 50 things alone. Because at the hospital, the policy was, say someone brought in an animal like a skunk or a kitten or a cat or a dog or anything that was hit by a car and they didn't own the pet, you can bring it in for humane euthanasia. or even, owners that didn't want to be present for their pet or didn't want to get ashes back and it was going to be a communal cremation. If they weren't going to be present and you weren't putting a catheter in the pet, depending on the doctor I worked with, she had been in the profession for like 25 years on emergency, and she'd just be like, okay, go euthanize that animal. And so, like, I think it was good and bad starting off like that, because it was sad at first, but you eventually really quickly get used to it. And so, like, after, like, the first, dozen or so, you're just like, you build a wall and you don't think about it, and it just becomes the norm. And I remember, like, we would get, litters of kittens that had, like, FIV or whatever, and they would all have to be euthanized because the shelter would be like, we can't really adopt them out, or like they're not doing well and they're not thriving and we can't, 1,000 reasons, or like whatever. So the doctor, like, I would even have scenarios when I went on from the emergency hospital and I worked at Banfield, which is a corporate veterinary hospital. They'd have like little pocket pets come in too, and if like hamsters and gerbils and guinea pigs, and like, if someone wanted to euthanize those, the doctor would be like, okay, go euthanize, like gas it down with anesthesia and then do like an intracardiac. And like intracardiac still freaks me out a little bit, even on little animals. It's just I don't know. But yeah, so I've probably euthanized hands down on my own like 200 things at least, which is crazy, without even considering vet school.
Yeah. Well, but
that's guess, not the norm for a lot of people or students.
Yeah, and I guess I remember I would do that occasionally at when I was a technician as well before vet school, but I was referring more towards like you running the euthanasia, like it's somebody's pet, you've been treating it for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, and then finally the decision's made, he's not responding to treatment, or he got worse, or these things happen, or run out of money, or the owners just emotionally can't do it. There's a myriad of emotions and reasons that people choose to do this, but being the one who has to talk to them about it and basically guide them to that decision and tell them what to expect, get paperwork signed. It can be a very delicate process, and I think that everybody does it a little bit differently, and everybody has a different method of having that conversation and going over all of the things. But I think that it's important to be able to tell owners what to expect and kind of help them feel like they're not killing their pet.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of delicate dance around the subject, like, yeah, you're going to be ending their life, but the way that I try to frame it is you're ending their suffering and you're letting them, leave the world with their dignity intact, which personally I would want as well. If I had terminal cancer and, nothing was going to help, chemo wouldn't do anything, I wouldn't want to sit there and suffer and just waste away until like I'm nothing, skin and bones, and have your family sit around. Like, that's so stressful. I don't want to go out like that personally, if I have a choice. So I think that I try to frame it that not in a negative light for people, because I think that is how most people view it, is like, oh, I can't do that. I'm killing them. They don't know. Like, all they know is that they're not going to hurt anymore, and that they're not going to be suffering. And I think that is a gift in and of itself, to be able to have that power to alleviate something's suffering, because that's why we all get into this job. We all want to fix them, of course, and have them live and have happy outcomes, but the reality is that we don't always get that.
Amen.
You don't have anything to say about that?
No, I do. It's such a touchy subject, because I'm very realistic, and I'm probably more skewed towards the euthanasia side than the opposite. Like, I don't like to see anything suffering, or if I think, unless it's my own pets, then we're like game over. Like, I'm probably completely opposite, but
Yeah.
I know I had the oncology rotation, and I remember seeing a lot of pets that were going through chemo, and they had a few months to live, and I'm like, why? Like, I didn't agree with certain situations on that rotation where I was like, we're keeping this pet alive for you, like, for the owner, not for the pet. Like, there was a bulldog that was like, not a bulldog, sorry. There was a bulldog, but that's not what I'm thinking of. There was a Labrador Retriever, 13 years old, came in, could barely walk. We had to, like, basically drag it through the hallway, labored breathing, had hemangiosarcoma in the liver. They were like, oh, we're going to, take you to surgery. We're going to take the tumor out, blah, 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 and whatever. And I was like, well, then how long's the dog going to have to live after that? And the doctor, she was like a very well-known oncologist she was visiting, and she's like, oh, if anything, up to 3 months. And I'm like, look at this dog that's suffering, that can barely walk. You're going to put this 13-year-old lab through surgery to come out, and then you're going to put it on chemo, and the max, like, survival time it has is 3 months. And I was like, that was one scenario where I was very upset, and I was like, this is not okay. But there's many, scenarios where it's really good and beneficial to do chemo or go down the route of, like, seeing an oncologist. But I'm so skewed in my thinking that if the dog or cat or whatever if it doesn't have a good quality of life, like, there's no reason to keep it alive.
Yeah.
So that's my problem, is seeing things alive when they shouldn't be. And so I'm probably too quick to be like, oh, euthanize.
I think that brings up a good point, though, and it's something that I think you learn with time is, like, okay, our job as veterinarians is to, alleviate suffering if we can, fix the animal, but basically to do no harm, okay? And we do not get an opinion. We are not allowed to have an opinion of what owners should do with their dog. And what I mean by that is we can't say, oh, you need to do this. We're not, that's not our job. At least how I view it. Our job is to give them the options and help guide them to the most appropriate decision, not only for the pet, but for them as well. And our personal feelings, like, I agree with you that situation you just described would be very irritating. But how I would try to approach that as the clinician would be, not necessarily trying to skew their mind towards, oh, this is a bad idea, but you have to give them all the facts, because I do agree that a lot of owners can be selfish in terms of, and maybe that's not the most, I'm going to say appetizing word, but, maybe that's not the most valued word, but it's selfishness in owners is one of the things that irritates me, and it's, they can't let go. But at the same time, you have to step back and try to put yourself in their shoes. Maybe this dog is the only thing they have left of their late husband who died, and it was his favorite dog.
Well, that's where it goes downhill for me when I get sad. That's the only thing that I get sad about. It's and like
that's the thing, is you never know, right? So I do think that some people are selfish and hold on way too long. And, you can't barge in there and, again, it's a delicate situation. You can't barge in there and say, you're wrong. Like, you're putting your dog through this. This is unnecessary, and you can't get that worked up about it. Do you kind of know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, is we're not really allowed to have an opinion and to say, you're going to do this with your animal, because that's not how it works.
No.
So I think that, yeah, I don't know. I just said a whole lot there, I guess.
No, I agree with you. I think I have an example, though, of when what you think is the right thing or what I would have recommended for a certain scenario a year or two ago was totally different now than after I've had different experiences. When I went to see Dahlia in San Francisco, we had that dog that had, remember, the calcinosis cutis, and it had all the lesions all over its body. She would, like, had a huge, like, pendulous abdomen. She looked like if she came into the vet and I saw her, I'd be like, this dog is in horrible shape. Like, you know, say it was one of her bad days.
Yeah.
And I would look at her and I'd be like, look at these skin issues. Like, this dog is suffering. And I probably would be like, oh, you know, you should euthanize her. She had, like, lymphoma. She was on prednisone every day. And I probably would have been like, you know, you can euthanize this dog. But then I thought about it, and I had been with her for a week. Every day that I was with her, she was like, so excited to, like, when we came home from work, she was like running around, like eating her food, just like jumping up and down, snuggled with me in the bed. And I'm like, this is the type of scenario that I need to think about. Like, I'm seeing this dog today that
a piece of its life.
Yeah, a piece of its life that week or that day. And, like, if that dog came in on a bad day, I would have been like, oh, euthanizes. I would have just judged her based on what her outer appearance looked like, not knowing that, like, 24 hours ago, she was, like, even though she looked like that, she had a good quality of life.
Yeah.
So I remember coming out of that being like, you really have to think and be like, if you can improve this dog's condition for the day or the next few weeks, like, she does have a good quality of life. And you can't judge the owner based on what she looks like on the outside, because they can't really do anything about that. But, like, if she's happy when they come home from work and she wants to run around in the yard, and she, like, wanted to go on long walks with us, and she's like this big seal, basically, like a big huge seal with, like, skin lesions that were erupting, but she was so happy, and she was on, like, no medication but prednisone. And I was just like, those are the types of dogs that need to be like, you know, think twice, Kevin, before you just judge. And you just, because if that was my dog, like, owners do know their dogs best, so it's like you should take their opinion and what they say into account a little bit, because, or a good amount, because just like my own dog, I'd be like, well, she's not normally like this, and even though she's had this, like, until yesterday she was, like, good and running around. So, like, you can't just, like, put people in a category. You can't mold everybody into the same scenario.
Very true. Yep. I think and that brings up a good point too. And I always say to owners, like, you know your dog best, or you know your cat best. I'm just seeing them at this moment in time. And I try to tell people if they're not sure, because that's I think a more difficult conversation with people, is having what I call the quality of life conversation. And that's do we keep going, or is it time to think about letting them go? You know, that's basically the point of it. And I try to, there's a couple things that I try to do, you know, guide people to do, so that they can come to that conclusion that, yes, it's time to euthanize. One is, I ask them, and I don't even expect an answer, but I'm like, think about the things that make, you know, Buster. Like, what does he like to do? Does he like to eat? Does he like to play fetch? Does he really like going on a walk, or, you know, in the car? Like, whatever it is that makes, you know, gets him excited. And if he isn't as interested and he's not doing those things, you know, especially if they're not eating, I think then that's a huge indication that it's time. The other thing I tell people to do too, for a week, 5 days, whatever, is get a calendar, and just at the end of the day do a smiley face or a frowny face, and say, you know, do that for however much time, so a week, you know, based on how that animal's day was. Did they have a good day, or did they have a bad day? Just do it for a week. And at the end of the week, go back and look at how many good days and how many bad days there were. If the bad outweigh the good, then that's another indication that it might be time. That. So I try to again guide people to make that decision for themselves, because I don't want them to feel like I'm pushing. And even in the situations where I really am pushing for the animal to be euthanized, I don't want the owners to look back on the situation, you know, 5 months down the line or whatever, and say, I feel like I was bullied and pressured into making that decision.
Yeah, it's the least
even
thing
if
you
it
want.
was the right decision. And I think that that's why it's such a delicate subject, and why some people can, take euthanasias and make that interaction with the owners a negative one. Mm-hmm. And for me, I try to avoid that by giving the owners enough information for them to feel like they're making the right decision.
Yeah.
I have them do those two things that I just mentioned, and then kind of come to the conclusion on their own. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, I would say, like 98% of the time, that works.
We had the psychological services department come and talk to us on our rotation about euthanasia, mm-hmm. and they said exactly what you just said. Is they said what makes like Buster, and they said sit down with people and be like, now tell me about Buster, like and have them just describe to you their dog, and then after they're done describing the dog, be like, now is that how Buster is now? And so, like, everything that they talk about why they love the dog, his personality, and then you, like, at the end, you're like, now is that how he's acting now or the mm-hmm. past week? And that sometimes makes people more aware. Yeah. So exactly what you said. It's just, like, I guess in a different way of putting it. But I think that's a very good way to do it.
I think it's that's the quality of life euthanasia. For me, I think there's, like, again, two categories. One is that it's time, like, AKA you're holding on too mm-hmm. long, this dog is suffering. The other one is, hey, your dog is not doing well, we did emergency surgery, they still aren't stabilizing, they're very critical, and we might want to think about, euthanizing, or your dog got hit by a car and the injuries are really severe. I hate to give, like, I've had some animals where it's like a $10,000 estimate to fix all of the problems.
I couldn't afford that.
And that's just a start. And any complications or any prolonged hospital stay, that adds to it. And again, euthanasia is a very financially driven decision, unfortunately, but that's kind of the reality mm-hmm. of the situation a lot of the times. So, I think that's a little bit of a different conversation. Yeah. And that one is more, again, giving them enough facts to be able to come to that conclusion themselves. Like, hey, we can do all of these things. Like, especially from a surgeon standpoint, we can always go to surgery. We can always cut things. But is that the best thing, again, for the animal and for the human involved, too? Because a lot of those times it's like emotionally taxing, it's financial burden, there's a lot that goes into it that I think that, our human counterparts, like the human doctors, human medical field, they don't have to deal with that. Mm-hmm. They don't really have to have the conversation about finances. They just do it. You need a CT, you're getting a CT. They don't ask you, oh, can you afford it? That's what you get. They also don't talk about euthanasia with their patients. So, again, something unique to veterinary medicine. I don't know. I was
going to say, you just brought that up, but it's sort of weird to think about. You don't have that conversation in human medicine, like, but someone could be like 95, dying of like a terminally ill cancer, and you never bring up that fact. You're just like, so what? You know how they say, like, oh, you only have this many months to live, but, like, when it comes down to it, what happens? They just...
Hospice.
Yeah, but you never talk about it. You're just like, they stop seeing you, you go to hospice, and then they drug you until you die. Yeah. That's basically it. Yeah. So it's like, oh, you're going to die, basically, in a more sometimes painful way. It's, like, slow and over a long time. That's so fucked up.
Yeah, it is.
It's so fucked up that you never talk about...
Well, would they don't learn about that in their curriculum, as far as I'm aware. They don't learn to have those conversations. They don't, I'm sure they have at least one lecture or something on, like, physician-assisted suicide, which is what, I think it's legal in Washington, Oregon, I want to say California as well. Maybe not California yet,
Maybe
but
not, no.
It's definitely popular. I don't want to say popular. Popular is not the word. I know there's some clinics in Switzerland that also do physician-assisted suicide, and basically you just overdose on barbiturates.
But I feel like that's sort of what hospice is. I feel like hospice is a way to... Because I have a very, like... Oh, God, I keep touching the dog's collar, sorry. I have a very skewed opinion now after seeing my grandma go through hospice, like, in the past year, that I don't know if I've never been aware. I hadn't been in medical school before that, but it just seems to me like they basically... I'm going to probably get, like, backlash for this, but, like, I feel like you basically just starve the body from everything until you die. Like, I just realized my mom listens to this, but I just... For my grandma, for example, started declining, and they have you on high sedatives, and you just keep giving, like, morphine every few hours, and then there comes a point where they stop giving you, they stop giving you nutrients, like, you don't get oral food or water. Yeah. You don't get an IV, so then obviously your body's going to give out over time. So then you're sedated on a medication, so you can't, like, maybe you are aware in your brain's still there, but, like, you can't even wake up because you're so sedate, and then you're not getting any food or water. So then what isn't that basically like you're starving and dehydrating a body and giving it all this medication so that they can't be aware of it until the heart stops?
Yeah.
And it like completely...
It's traumatizing. Yeah,
I got in, like, arguments about it because I had never witnessed it, I don't think, at an adult age, and I just remember being very disturbed by it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're basically... You're just slowly doing the same thing as euthanasia, but in a legal way.
Air quotes legal. I don't know. I think that's, like, more inhumane.
No, I do too. Like,
I mean, not to get off subject too much, but, you know.
I think it's still on subject.
Well, we're veering off into the human side of things, but I think that, you know, as we've kind of said before, euthanasia is just a touchy subject. There occasionally will be clients who do not believe in euthanasia, and that's hard to deal with. Yeah. Because you're like, you know, for instance, I had a couple months ago a patient that was 16 years old, 16-year-old dog, 3 different types of cancer. And we were going to do surgery to take out its gallbladder. And miraculously, at the time before surgery, she only had 2 types of cancer. During her recovery from that surgery, we diagnosed lymphoma. So now 3 different types of cancer. And the dog was very unstable, stayed in the hospital for about a week and a half, but ended up going home. And I just, I think that dog just recently came in for a recheck into the hospital. But that owner, it's like the quality of life of that dog for me, like, she's deaf, she's blind, she doesn't really have an appetite, she's still alive. And I guess to that client, existing, merely existing, is an okay quality of life. She doesn't believe in euthanasia. And that's difficult to deal with because for me, I have, you know, a lot of emotions about that, and I think it's wrong. And should we be putting a 16-year-old dog through this surgery where it's already really critically unstable? And I don't know, but we did it.
You did it.
Yep. Have you ever been in a situation where you have to do a euthanasia on a perfectly healthy animal because of behavioral problems?
Yeah, I think there was a cane Corso, is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. That bit maybe a family member, and it was like 3-year-old, very healthy, like very in shape, fit. They adopted it, or not adopted, they bought it from like a well-known breeder for like $5,000. And yeah, we ended up I didn't, it was the doctor who was in charge of it all. So like, I guess at the time I don't know, I remember feeling a little bad for the dog, but at the same time it like mauled like this woman, like her whole arm, and she was in the hospital. So the husband brought the dog in and had it euthanized. And I think that I was torn, but I was probably 70% for it and maybe 30% against it. But yeah, like I don't know how I'm going to deal with those types of things. I don't think I will just euthanize off of behavior unless there's like a documented case where the dog...
I would encourage you to not make those rules for yourself at this point in your career, because you never know what you're going to encounter.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get like a healthy puppy and they're going to be like, I don't want it.
Well, that's different. I refuse to do euthanasia on animals because people don't want the animal anymore.
Yeah, like,
that's not a valid excuse. Absolutely not. I had, as the doctor, I had in my rotating internship an animal that was just behaviorally not, like, he was okay with humans, but other animals, super aggressive. And this lady, this owner had done just about everything, and you could see like the internal struggle with her. Like, she put in years of effort into this dog to try to behaviorally rehabilitate him. He would break out of her yard and go down. He killed or mauled, I think, a cow.
Oh my God.
Chickens, other people's dogs, like just super aggressive. He was perfectly fine to humans, but super aggressive to other animals. And she tried everything, and you could just see the struggle on her. And you know, 'cause she told you, or she told me that she'd been to other vets before and they'd refused to euthanize the dog. And you could just see that she was expecting, you know, me to say no. And I believed her, that, you know, she had tried. And, you know, most recently it was the cow that was mauled. And I was able to, you know, I felt a little icky about it, but I feel like, you know, there are some animals that have behavioral issues and that are not going to be able to be solved. Mm-hmm. And whoever's fault it is, if it's biology, if it's nature, nurture, humans to blame, whatever, you know, the relief on that lady's face was very palpable, and you could just see, like, she was very emotionally distraught. Like, she's very attached to this dog, but just she was stressed beyond belief because of how that affected her lifestyle. And I think that it's I don't know. It's something that I hope I never have to go through again, but again, try to put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, I'm so connected to people that I feel like I could, like, if you had a really case like that, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah. It's hard. I also had, again, euthanizing a perfectly healthy animal, my same rotating internship. So where I was in Arizona, most of these shelters were full. Most did not take cats at all. So you either had to euthanize the cat if it came in as a stray, or have somebody within the hospital or somebody who, you know, a friend of a friend, take the cat and foster it and then try to go through a rescue there. That was hospital policy. And I remember this was pretty early on. I was maybe only a month or two into this internship. So like a month, maybe 3 months out of vet school. And somebody overnight had left this perfectly healthy cat on the doorstep because it was peeing outside of the litter box. and
not for nothing. If I had a
basically-
fucking litter box, I'd pee outside of it too.
Yeah, I know.
Those are nasty ass things.
They are.
A litter box is the nastiest thing I've ever encountered in my life.
Yeah.
Besides, like, a random dive bar's bathroom. Like, that is the nasty. It's so nasty. Oh, my God. Ugh, yeah. Anyway.
And I was the doctor coming on for the day for ER, and the overnight intern chose not to deal with the issues, so it was pushed onto me as the coming doctor coming on shift. And I ended up having to euthanize this perfectly healthy cat. And I remember that was the first time afterwards I went into the bathroom and I like started bawling because I felt so guilty that
God.
I had to do that. And I think that kind of brings up another subject of how there is a huge emotional toll when you repeatedly have to euthanize things, and especially when it's a patient that you're attached to. Like, I had a patient that I was dealing with for 4 or 5 weeks, and he was tetraplegic, couldn't walk. He was a big old Rottweiler. We all got really attached to him, and we were hoping he had a ventral slot, so one of his intervertebral discs, or the little disc between your vertebrae or your backbones, was pressing on his spinal cord, and he had surgery, but surgery didn't help, and the owners chose to try like medical management and like aggressive rehabilitation and acupuncture and all of that afterwards. And he was my patient for maybe four or 5 weeks. And the day came where we kind of had to make that decision, and that was a tough euthanasia also. So I think that, again, another thing that human doctors don't have to deal with is this emotional toll, because we get these, if it's different if a patient, dies, or versus if you're the one and you're very attached to it and it's one you've had long term, that you're kind of pulling that trigger.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Did you ever run into anything like that where you have this, like, emotional
roller coaster every day of my life.
or burden from euthanizing an animal or anything like that?
I think, alright, so I had a problem. Are you, like, looking at my... yeah. I spilled a little bit of candle wax as I moved this candle, and it spilled all over the table. No, so I had a problem that I developed over a few years that I think working at the emergency hospital, that you just get accustomed to euthanizing things, and you get accustomed to death, especially being on emergency. You're used to, like, hit by cars, or, blocked cats, or, every type of thing that can go wrong happens on emergency. So, like, very early on at an early age in my career, I got accustomed to sad scenarios. Like, I remember being like, I was 19 and a technician, and I was rushing this like little dog downstairs, and it took its last breath in my arms. And then like 20 minutes later, I had to bring this like 90-year-old woman downstairs. Like, I remember she was, I'll never forget this story. She was holding onto my arm, and she was like barely could walk, and she was like, this was the only, like, dog that I had left in my life, and, like, my whole family's gone. I have no children or grandchildren, and my husband died years ago, and blah, 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 and this dog is all I had. And I had to walk her down at, like, 19, and I was the one that, like, was holding her dog that had its last breath, and I had to walk the lady down later. And I remember that was, like, a very pivotal moment where I, like, had to, like, internalize things. Like, that's where you, like, learn, like, you can't, like, break down crying to this lady, especially a guy. That's a whole other scenario. Like, guys crying, in a public scenario is less accepted than a woman.
Yeah.
So it's a whole, like, another time for a woman's talk. But, So I think I developed a resistance to feelings over the years, and in the past 3 years, I think I've tried to do the opposite and to actually try to feel. And I read this article once in the bathroom. I was in the bathroom and I was reading on my phone, and it was about a medical doctor, a human doctor, and they were like, I think it was an oncologist, and they were like, how do you deal with the stress of your job and dealing with, sadness and death all the time? And he was like, the way I stay humane is every 6 months I take one case and I let myself get emotionally involved, where I get very into the family and the history and the backstory and everything about the person, and I get so connected and I let it affect me and I cry and all that stuff. And then after that person, I don't let anybody else affect me. You can still be caring and compassionate, but you can't let it come home with you every night. So I think every few months, maybe more soon than that, but maybe every 2 to 3 months, I'll try to, with one patient, even if they're not dying, I'll just try to be more caring in general. Dogs, I'll, when I was on rotations, I'll try to take them out and be like, oh, let's walk outside and let's go on the grass and I'll pet you and talk to you, or I'll go to your cage and I'll sit with you for 5 minutes, when I want to just go on the computer and be by myself. So I try to do more empathetic things in general, but also get really invested in something a few times a year so that I don't get so immune to it all.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know. I think it's hard. I think euthanasia in general is just hard, and I think that it can be something where you almost have to train yourself. That I know some doctors that cry every euthanasia they do, and that's their thing. For me personally, I can't do that because I have to kind of keep these walls up because I will feel too much, and mentally and physically I cannot deal with that. In my own life, that messes me up. If I have my walls down and I allow myself to feel,
no, thank you,
feel all the feelings, all the things, I wouldn't survive. I wouldn't be able to continue with my job. So sometimes I do have to just be this impartial role in this, play that is euthanasia, and just kind of stay out of it. Occasionally, it's usually the patients that I've dealt with long term that I have emotionally invested in, that I'll cry and get, choked up about. But I try to stay impartial, and maybe that's perceived as cold, but for me physically, I cannot let that down. I can't let those emotions and all of the sadness and volatile high emotions, I can't let that in, because it'll for my own well-being and sanity, I just can't do that.
I know there's varying opinions on it too, but for me, I try to portray sort of what I'd want to see. If I went to the doctor, say we were able to euthanize in the human profession. If I went to my doctor and I was euthanizing my aunt or something, you know what I mean? I still want to pick something that's very could happen, because then it'd be, I'm superstitious. Superstitious? Oh my god. Superstitious. Can you say it?
Superstitious.
Superstitious. Oh my god.
Go.
I can't say it quick. But oh my god. So I wouldn't want my doctor bawling his eyes out. You know what I mean? As I'm putting down my aunt. That would make me feel like I was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Or I was making the wrong decision, it would just make me question everything. And I want someone. You go to the doctor because they're high. You look at them like they're higher up or superior, and they know what they're doing, and you look for them for guidance on your health and various subjects. So it's if I'm putting something down, I don't really want them to be as weak as me. They're supposed to comfort me, and you can comfort and be compassionate, but not be on the same level as me, bawling my eyes out.
I don't think emotions are weak.
Not emotion. I'm saying if you were putting down a pet and you're saying people they cry every time they euthanize a pet, I don't want, if I'm putting down my pet, as I'm crying because I know their whole story, I know the life I had with them, who Buster was as a pet outside of this vet hospital. Yeah. And if you start crying with me, it's like, what are you crying for? Like, I have more reason to cry than you. You know what I mean? So it's like, you should be compassionate, put your arm on me. Like, you can be caring and be human, but...
And maybe that's going to be your style. But
so that's just,
everybody does their own thing.
So I'm saying everyone's different. That's why I do what I would want. And so there's a percentage of the population that will like that. There's a percentage that'll hate that and think I'm cold-hearted and like not a great doctor. And then there's going to be a percentage that's indifferent or doesn't have an opinion yet. So it's like that's the whole thing. It's like there's so many different levels of it. Like,
yeah, I mean,
it's death. So it's like no one can.
Yeah.
You can't express death in the perfect way for everyone.
That's true. And I think ultimately you got to bring it back to why are you doing it? And usually it's to end your patient's suffering. And that's that. Take everything else out of the equation and come back to why are you doing it? Mm-hmm. You know, the majority of the situations, the animal's very sick or is hurting or is not going to get better, and there's nothing you can really do. So I think that's important to just keep that in the back of your mind. And there's going to be situations, I mean, there's always going to be crazy situations around euthanasia. He said, she said, you know, ex-wife, divorced couple,
by the seashore.
Whatever. But I think that I'm sure we could talk like another 3 hours on this subject, but I don't know. I would encourage, I think, our listeners, if you guys have any comments on it, just, you know, let us know on Instagram, you know, comment on our posts or whatever. And, you know, if you guys have any stories you want to share, anything like that, let us know. But I think that, at least in the veterinary field, it's something that is going to affect all of our lives at some point.
I think this brings up Hafu Vet. Like, I would love to know her first name, first off. But this whole subject goes back to a post I remember that she posted, I don't know if it was a story or whatever, like a month and a half ago, where she euthanized her first animal, and she had like a little like 8-minute or 5-minute video about it and how she felt, and you know how it was her first one, and you know being emotional and all that, you know, that goes along with it. And I think it's a very, I don't know, I feel like it would be interesting to see everyone's story about their first time they personally had to euthanize a pet, whether it be like your own or a client's, you know, or a stray, you know, a humane euthanasia. I don't know. I just think it's good to talk about that in general. That's like a big area that people don't talk about, and you're just thrown into it. Especially in you go to vet school, you don't euthanize anything on your own, and then you get out and like day one, you're supposed to like euthanize something and like deal with it all on your own. Yep.
I think it's part of why this job is hard, but also why it's, you know, one of the better jobs in the world. Mm-hmm. So I think that, you know, with that, I don't have too much more to say at this point because we don't want this episode to be too long. Do you have any closing remarks on the subject?
My only closing remarks would be, you need to find a way to deal with I guess the darkness of it all. Mm-hmm. Which is a very strong way to put it, but like coming full circle, my last patient on my last rotation ever in veterinary school was a cat that I dealt with all day, and I ended up really liking the cat. And you know, I was really stressed out about it was going to be referred to cardiology on Monday, and being a student, you have to like come in on the weekend and do like bullshit work and like come in on a Saturday and a Sunday really early to do like a temperature and a physical exam and write its notes and then go home and go on with the rest of your day. And I was so stressed out about coming in to do that for this pet because I was just like, you know, I'm trying to figure out my life. I'm graduating. This is my last block. I don't want to have to come in and blah, 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 blah. And then we, like, end up euthanizing the pet. And I'm like, yes, this like, alleviated all the stress that I had for the weekend. But at the same time, it's not what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, at the end of the day, yeah, I have less to do this weekend. But it's like, now the pet's gone and dead. And so the last pet I had ever ended up getting euthanized because we couldn't figure out what was wrong with the pet for the day. So it's like it sort of affected like my night, and as far as I reflected back on how I was sort of selfish and I didn't want to come in to take care of this pet because I had more important things to worry about. But now like the pet is like their life's gone. So I took like that night and I had to like deal with the owners, who was like an old married couple, and they were like in their 70s and they were really cute, and like old people really get to me, like they like hit my heartstrings. Mm-hmm. And so we had like our professor of the department. He was so caring to these people, and I remember like he probably could have left hours ago because the resident could have dealt with all of this, and he like walked the people out front, like held the old guy's arm, like all this stuff. And I'm just like, I want to be like empathetic as you are when I'm like 45, 50, however old he is, you know who I'm talking about. But I just remember I let myself think about it a little bit. I got a little upset watching the pet be euthanized. Like I had to, put it in the body bag, tag it up. They're going to do necropsy, all that stuff. I internalized it a little bit. I drove home, I reflected upon it, and then like an hour later I was like, I can't like think about this the rest of the night, and so I just let it go. And it's like I let it go. I made myself dinner. You know what I did? I walked my dog. I gave her extra love and was like happy that she was alive, and I tried to like take out my stress and put it in a positive way. And like I always give her love and attention, especially every day when I get home from work, but I was just like, I'm gonna give it a little bit more today, pet her for a few, 10 more minutes than I do like on the bed when I first get home, walk her a little longer, be like, give her a little bit more, like, oh, you're so cute, blah 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 blah, and like just get my darkness out through that and like give my energy to something that was living. And that's what I did. So I think everyone needs like a healthy way to get it out. And I think later on I had another glass of wine, which I always do, but
process it. Yeah,
I just think it's good. You can't just, the people that internalize everything and let it bring them down into the darkness are the ones that I feel are a part of the population that end up like considering taking their lives in the future. And I've always witnessed that with certain people. Like you just have to find a way to cope with it, or else you're gonna like let it like suck you in. And that's with any medical profession or any profession in general.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So
well, I just went on a rampage.
We kind of did. We tackled a lot of things. So I guess on that note,
oh, God.
it's time to end. Again, if you guys have any thoughts, comments, anything like that, let us know on any version of the social medias that we have, I guess.
Chip chip cheerio.
And yeah, we will, I guess next week we'll hopefully talk about something maybe a little bit more chipper and not as much of a downer. But again, like we said, I think it's an important subject, so I'm glad that we tackled it.
It's very important.
Yeah. You have anything else?
I don't know. Not at the moment. I just now I feel a little heavy. It's a very deep subject.
Somber.
A somber night.
All right. Well, I guess
on that note,
let's get down to it.
Happier note.